Perfect. All right. Welcome everyone to 1 Million Minds. We have an exciting show for you today. Balaji and I have a couple of interesting topics to talk about, and thank you for tuning in again. Today, I would like to touch upon a topic that's very near and dear to my heart is education and how I see the future of education in blockchain. So, I want us to have a discussion about that. And Balaji is going to talk a little bit about the just Web3 and decentralization, right? Like it's a very, very fundamental topic to talk about, and how his thoughts are on where we are headed as a Web3 and how decentralization is going to be a big part of it, and just a little bit of history about how where we are Web2, are we transitioning to that. So, without further ado, I'm going to kick us off. I'm going to start talking through my first topic, and I'm going to start sharing the screen. And, all right, you should be able to see it in a second. So I know we've talked about hype cycles for a while, and I kind of point to it every time I talk about it. But I just wanted to, those who have not seen a hype cycle from Gartner, I want to make sure you have an opportunity to actually see how it looks like, and see how it looks like and where we are. So normally, any hype cycle, again, I want everybody have this framework as we talk into this. Any hype cycle, a new technology comes in, there's an innovation piece of it, and there's a peak of inflated expectations. So everybody thinks it's going to solve world hunger and it's going to cause global peace. But then there's a big drop off, and they call it a disillusionment. But it's not a bad thing, because every single technology goes through this. But what this does is basically we've gone past the major hype, but now we are actually going to build real world use cases. That's what, to me, this means. And some of the topics we are covering are actually here, and they've grown up the slope of enlightenment, where real products solving real use cases, solving real world problems, or where this comes out of. This is where the exciting part of the cycle, where people are actually building to help people, solve issues. And actually, that's where the adoption starts. That's when usually before there's a lot of early adopters, this is where the mainstream adoption of technology happens. So I just wanted to set that stage. We don't have to go through every single thing in there, but I feel like a lot of our use cases where you're talking about either in the dissolution phase or are growing up the slope of enlightenment, which is really where the next 2 years is going. And if you want to look at further out, you can see technologies that are 10 years out, like metaverse in this particular case. So you can have a sense for where we're going. If you are building something, where do you focus your energy on? So that was the intent of that. So I just want to set that expectation.
This is a great start, Rajni. I think this also gives me a little connecting point to the topic, what I'm talking about. I think especially when it comes to the slope of enlightenment and the plateau of productivity, what happens in terms of decentralization. Go ahead. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So this is another. I know a lot of our audience, including me, right? We've all went to college, and 20 years later, for me at least, I've always questioned the value that I got there. So what I mean by that is, right now, back growing up in India, I didn't have exposure to YouTube or access to all this information, knowledge available. So we had to go to college. We have to go engineering, doctor, whatever you did, right? And then you got a certificate. Using that, you either came here to do your master's or you went on to get a job. So if you kind of fast forward 20 years later, information and knowledge is free. Like, I can learn anything I want just using YouTube. And there's so many other mediums where you can, there's a podcast, a Medium article. There's so many ways you can learn. So as I was thinking through this process on where is global education going, I feel like it's almost a very ripe market for disruption. If you just look at the whole global education and training expenditures, it's about 10 trillion is what we projected to go by 2030. If you just take post high school, that's about $2.5 trillion market. So there's a lot of money at play as far as education. The levers have changed on how people are learning, and also just from a macroeconomic view, there are a lot of middle class, global middle class. When I say that 70% is actually going to come from China and India. It's about 4.8 billion people are moving into that in the next few years. So what that means is middle class means there's a lot of people who are eager to learn but don't have a lot of money to spend on it. So we'll talk a little bit more about how expensive college and everything's become later. But really, just it's a giant market, and there's going to be more need for learning coming into it. But if you step back and say, okay, all knowledge and information now is free, these institutions and colleges, what they need to do is pivot to make sure now you can interpret this information should be their main goal. Very small percentage of universities doing it. The others have to do it in order to survive. Otherwise, this whole inflection point is going to leave a lot of universities in the dust. So that's just my overall hypothesis, right? So why are these universities and things still in play? Because when you get your college degree, when you go to apply for a role, the biggest hindrance is not the knowledge or information, is the credentials that they're asking for. Do you have an undergraduate degree? And because of that, the majority of ours have to have a degree to be able to eligible for a job. But things are changing, including Apple have taken some of their requirements that says you need a college degree as part of their requirements before they can even interview somebody, right? It is happening, and it will continue to go that way. So if that's whole setup, right? So if you are somebody who likes to doesn't have a college degree, but you've learned a lot of things, or you've done a Coursera course, and you have a GitHub repository to show your quality as a software engineer, and you've done a couple of college courses. Imagine being able to present a whole view of your profile to your hiring, or even you applying for a master's, to that using just one source or one way of communicating that. And that's what I feel like the blockchain technology comes into play. If I can get credentials saying I am somebody who's finished Coursera course in Solidity, I'm just making sure. I don't know if they even offer that, but I've done that. I've done 2 courses in blockchain chain building, and I've done a few things. So anyway, it's all that I've done in different places, but I own all of that information, and I can easily present that, send it to my hiring company, or that's where you can it helps you. But on the flip side, if somebody's looking for somebody with this particular set of talent, it makes searching for me easier too, right? So that's what I feel like this whole market is a giant market. I think a few things are changing in the market, and is setting us up for where I, as an individual, control my credentials, and I show what I want to show, rather than having a college degree with a stamp to prove that I might not have that information. So that's do you have any take on that, Balaji?
Oh, absolutely. I think all of that, what you said, makes sense. Only thing I would like to add is that I think over a period of time, right, I think the knowledge is everywhere. Knowledge is free, but who's responsible to curate it, peer review it? That's the key here, right? Because I mean, there's a joke, right? If it's on Wikipedia, it must be true, right? That's the opposite, extreme opposite of free knowledge, right? So I think a lot of these companies like Coursera and others who collate this information, peer review, make sure the information is right, then they become the authority to give the certification. Say, hey, this information that somebody learned is valid and it's peer reviewed. I think that historically that's done by the big universities, but I think you're right in the sense there's a lot of other people who are able to do that. Now, blockchain comes in there to certify, make sure where you learned is provable and things like that. I like the whole idea.
Perfect. Yeah, so I just wanted a visual way of showing what I just talked about. So all of the information about the student, whether they went to college to do it, they learned it in Coursera, they're online, whatever it is, right? It's all captured here. So anybody who, like for example, some of the use cases I'm going to talk through is just simple things like sending my sheets about my actual credentials, right? Like my certificate, these were my scores during college. I had to do all that for applying for my master's. But people have to do this years. They're applying for going from high school to college, And then when you're an employer, you have to show them that you actually graduated. So all this process is not very straightforward at this point, and especially for international students, gets even more painful. And I had to apply for my second master's. I had to go back to India to get it was just painful, right? So imagine being able to have everything on blockchain where it's easy to pull, nobody can change it. I'll talk a little bit about how there's some, to Balaji's point, right? The content could be wrong, but people are also producing fake certificates, right? So there's a lot of things in play here. So where we can use blockchain to actually improve this whole thing. So I just wanted to visually show that there's teachers getting scores in there. Your content could be on the blockchain. The testing, your test that you've taken, everything is on a place where it cannot be changed and easy to share. So that's really where I'm thinking this is going. Do you have any thoughts, Balaji, on that? On where do you see this being useful?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I can personally relate to that. Right, when I came to the States and I have to prove that I have the education, it has to go through this month-long exercise of some agency middleman trying to prove that the Indian university, which is a reputable university, is a valid certificate here. If that happens for a reputable university, you can only imagine there's 100 more universities out there whose names are not even known internationally. So I think the key here is, like you said, like the person who issues the certificate and the person who receives it, it's all like it's provable instantly through the blockchain. If it's registered and without any confusion, I think that'll expedite the whole process of people getting to where they want to, either a college admission, their jobs, anything, right? I think it'll cut down the time dramatically.
Absolutely. There's time and there's cost involved. So let's talk about that a little bit. So this is one of the main use cases I see for blockchain education is just record certification and credentials verification. So I just have there were 100,000 fake degrees sold in the U.S. alone, and they run about $1,000 a pop. So it's good to that the blockchain will help us show our credentials, but the people who actually earn these credentials now have a bigger value to it. Let's say you did go to college and you spent the money, you got a solid certificate. What if somebody comes with a fake Harvard certificate, right? So those are very just a simple use case to show how verified degrees from college or verified degrees from, there's so many online universities and big universities are partnering with Coursera, Udemy, and all that, offering their courses too. So if you can show these credentials were earned by you went through this course, you went through the test, and you actually have proven it, that should be as if in the future, if we can replace or serve in place of a college degree, I think our lives will be a lot easier. And I think that's where education as a whole is going, just because of how expensive it's gotten. And like I talked about the macroeconomic view, there's about another 4.8 billion people moving into in the other parts of the world, and they need to have education. They need to have a way to show their credentials for whatever they want to become next in their life. So there are a few companies that are trying to solve this problem. IBM and Sony have partnered with the companies to do that. Learning Machine, helping institutions issue certificates. So BlockCert is another one, open standard for blockchain credentials and record keepers. This is one of the companies that's trying to use blockchain to create secure records. So there are a lot of companies working on it, but this is a giant market. Maybe there's opportunity to focus on a specific set of needs that form a certification, or even offer this to colleges that don't understand how to get this on a blockchain. There's just plenty of opportunities in this space as a builder to actually help solve this problem using blockchain. So, Balaji, your thoughts?
Absolutely. I like it. I think this is the way it should be, right? I think a lot of time is actually wasted. And also the reputation. Think about like if you're saying 100,000 fake degrees are being produced, and look at what it does to the actual people with the valid degrees. Now they have to be verified again, right? This kind of chaos ensues when fake degrees float around, right? So everything takes time. So I think if you're going to get all that time back when this thing is in full implementation.
Perfect. All right. So this one of the things I touched upon is the massive online courses that I think they started in 2011, 2008. I can't exactly remember, but basically a lot of people are using these courses and getting a lot of credentials along with it, along graduate degrees. I know I have seen courses from Wharton in Coursera, from Harvard. I know there's EDUX, I think EDX. I think there's another one that's Harvard has its own online learning. So the opportunities are endless, but one of the main things, I think the first ever one that was open had like a million plus people enrolled, but only 2% graduated. But if there was a credentialing offer at the end of it saying, hey, they finished it from a degree from Stanford or at least a certificate from Stanford, I'm pretty sure that the number of people who finished those courses will be higher. So I think it started with the intent of let's spread the knowledge, which is great. But if we can, standardize the credentialing aspect of it, I think this is going to be great because just from a sheer number, right? Universities can support maybe thousands. But what I'm talking about, we are looking at billion plus students coming online. How do we train the next set of billion people with the best possible education? Now that anybody around the world can do any course anywhere, right? So how do we leverage technology to provide the best information to everybody out in the world and have credentialing as part of it? So it's super exciting for me just thinking through that. There's a couple of companies that are trying to solve this problem. BitDegree is doing a free online course, and ODEM is a decentralized marketplace for education resources. So there's companies offering these, but the marketplace is being built. I just feel like we're just scratching the surface as far as what we could possibly do in this space.
This is while you're talking, I'm thinking of this. I think what's happening, if I'm guessing this right, is so universities offer a bunch of subjects, or they call it, let's say, package solution, right? You either take the package and run with it without knowing whether you're going to make enough money later when you finish the package, or so that's one confusion that causes a lot of people to question the whole thing, right? Okay, you give me a 4-year package and I have to go through all this, and eventually when I end up in the job pool, how much of this package am I going to use? Now, this new vision says, okay, you don't need to do the package, let's modularize it. Now, you can pick what module you want. Granted, like, the person has to be smart enough to figure the package contents. They're putting together their own package, right? So now they have to. So I wonder, maybe there's going to be people showing up soon where they help you put these modules together into a workable package. Because, I mean, if you think about it, it can go two different ways, right? Like, for example, if I'm a person who wants to work in computer, I can learn JavaScript and HTML and I'm set. I can start earning money. But is that the entire story without the foundational knowledge of problem solving? There's a lot of other things that go underneath programming, but you get into the market with JavaScript and HTML and you start earning, and it's exciting, right? But what happens if JavaScript is not there anymore? At the rate programming languages are getting cleaned up, you will be out of job as soon as that language disappears. So maybe one thought I have is maybe there's a new opening for people who are putting these modules together for people so they can continuously evolve. Because maybe you're right in the sense that I do a 4-year, 8-year degree and I'm done for life. And we are moving away from that. It's always learning, always putting together a package, right? You got to be continuously learning.
That is an important point you brought up, right? So we are switching to what we'll consider lifetime learners rather than just 4 years of college and be done, just because, especially in the technology space, it's moving so fast, things are transforming. So there is a movement called uncollege, undegree, I forget it, but basically there's like 5,000 courses. You can put a package, for example, let's just talk along the same lines, right? As a programmer, there's components to it, just pure coding. But to your point, problem solving, communication, because one of the biggest issues that programmers, they can do heads down coding if you give them the content, but they don't even know how to ask the right questions. Have they ever interacted with a business analyst? How do you extract the information you need? Because even a multiple discovery sessions with business units, it's tough to kind of formulate it. But if you can bring it to that and then give it to somebody doing that, so there's the whole value chain has a lot of moving pieces. for you to be a successful developer, you have to learn more than just code, right? And I think you can build if let's say I'm a senior programmer in Google, I can build a course that I feel like, okay, these are 5 or 7 topics or courses you have to take. There's all available in Coursera, but I'm going to put it together to say this track, if you do this track, I will certify you, not that, but somebody will certify you saying you are eligible now to go at least interview, because I know these are all life skills or important skills I use on a daily basis. And you know what I'm saying? It will be more to your point where somebody graduates from this course and actually has real life skills. Because I can guarantee you, when I graduated from my chemical engineering, I knew a lot of theory, but I don't know how useful I would have been in real life going helping somebody. I didn't learn anything about communication. I didn't know I've never stepped into a chemical engineer, a factory. It was very book-based knowledge. When I learned, everything I learned was once I joined the job. But so I'm pretty sure I was learning on my person who hired me. But if you can take the other way, where you're learning, you're coming in, I'm pretty sure a company will pay you more or be happier to take you if you're ready for a real life job, right? So I think there's going to be some interesting opportunities in this space, just because we are transforming as a society to where we can find courses that are actually useful when you graduate. And so on the flip side, I'm going to move on the flip side, what's going to happen is universities are going to have to get cleaner in their process too. What I mean by that is, I'm not going to pay $50,000 at a 4-year drama degree or a finance degree. I'm using them just an example because I have a relative who went through that. They paid for 4 years, $45,000 in debt when they graduated, and the first job they could find was an apprentice role, no pay, and they had to do something like that for 2 years before they could even actually start making money. So if it was a business and I told you that you give me $50,000, you're not going to actually get a job, and then you're going to learn on the job and do it. So all I'm saying is the universities now have to clean up their act to make sure the degrees that they're offering actually has a real world impact, because all of the online courses and open universities are going to there, right? So I'll just touch upon this because I think we've talked around this a little bit, but basically cost of a education in the United States has gone up by 500%. Is the value gone up? I don't think so. I think state school is about $20,000 and private schools are close to $40,000 a year. And most people don't a high percentage of them don't graduate, but all of them, a very high percentage of them, whether they graduate or not, have a big student debt when they leave, right? Yeah. So so cost is high. You're not seeing the same amount of value, and there's alternatives that actually are preparing you for real world. So that kind of all melts together to get into the open source universities. They roll up many benefits of the blockchain into one. You can measure what you've done, your credentials, and have some legitimacy when it comes to actual that you've done this and you actually are ready for the real world. And these credentials are in a place where anybody can access it. You can use it for your new employee. You can use it for your furthering of education. So I just feel like, and again, we can do this at scale. That's the main thing, right? Doing it at scale and making sure we can get a lot of people who don't have access to the money still be able to educate themselves and earn a living. So some companies in this space are Live EDU, decentralized courses, Gilgamesh, open source knowledge sharing, and open source university, where the digital credential wallets connecting learners to credentialing opportunities. So again, there's so much opportunity in this space. I'm excited about what's coming. Any closing thoughts from you, Balaji, about this?
I think this will be neat if this happens, right? So as we go along this path and people are getting educated according to their own choices and they're putting to their modules, I'm envisioning there's going to be a work experience component to this whole thing, right? So, okay, let's say I put together a bunch of courses in Coursera and I learn it, but again, you still have to work it somewhere. And I wonder, maybe the employers soon will start participating in this certification program, because I think one, like you touched upon, right? University degrees are book knowledge and practical knowledge is completely different, right? So you're missing one piece of the puzzle. Well, how do I certify someone to have learned it and have used it to the maximum potential of what they have learned? It's a tricky problem because the employers don't even participate anywhere. All you get is reference calls. If you go to another company, they call somebody and they say, hey, did this person work here? Did they do the good job? And that's it, right? There's literally, that's all exchange is happening between people to prove that you did it. You did implement what you learned in an efficient, good way. And of course, there's this LinkedIns of the world where you say what you want to say and you project the image. But I wonder if it can be a more substantial evidence, right? To say, hey, this person came in with this degree, they worked here, and they did what they learned, and things like that, right? There's one piece missing, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some vertical integration of this happening. At least one example I can think of is in India. Like HCL is a big IT firm in India. What they've done is they've developed their own college. What I mean by that is they actually have a different admission process too. It's just not purely based on scores. They have their own entrance exam. So they're doing they specifically test for communication skills. So what I'm saying is they really are kind of the top of the funnel. They already are looking for certain things that will make them amazing employees for HCL when they graduate, right? Mm-hmm. And then they put them through the actual courses that are a little bit more real world oriented rather than just theory. And when they do that, when they graduate from that, they have this excellent pipeline of candidates to hire from. Right. So that's one. But I absolutely agree is if you have let's just say a Coursera course, graduating from that is Solidity engineer. Again, I'm going back to that. How many Web3 startups would love to be able to hire from there, so they will even sponsor it and maybe even do the teaching. I just feel like there's going to be some vertical integration where companies will now, with the credential, they can look at their scores, and some of them, I think this is called HackerRank, where you can actually take tests to say, I'm 9 in Solidity, 6 in JavaScript. So you're not just getting somebody who just has a certificate, you actually know how good they are. So I think that's where we're going. So I'm excited about it, and I would love to get your thoughts on or the audience. I think this space is going to be one of the key use cases for blockchain. I'm excited about it.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's exciting. Education is one of those fields where it's forever green, right? Things are happening, and disruptions will happen with blockchain for sure.
Perfect. All right. So that was great conversation. So, Paji, let's switch to your topic. I'm excited about learning more about it.
Absolutely. Let me share my screen here in a second. Okay, there you go. So, for today's topic, again, continuing with the Web3 bigger agenda of what is Web3 and how things are shaping up or what's critical for Web3. One of the things I was thinking about, okay, so everything runs on internet these days. So the question really becomes how centralized or how decentralized the internet as it stands today. Why do we need to do a better job at building a new version of internet even, right? So if you look back at the history, right, essentially it all started with the Department of Defense and DARPA, ARPANET. And then we all got a bunch of modems, which we can use to dial into a telephone number. If you knew a telephone number of a server, you can dial in again, and then you can participate in a chat, IRC chat, or go for a server, whatever at that time, right? So you can call that a very early version of internet. It was decentralized because there's a bunch of servers and a bunch of clients, and they knew how to connect. And then eventually, as the concept caught on, I think a couple of things happened, right? The browser is a key invention that came into place and kind of consolidated all your experiences in the web into that view. Now, once the browser came into play, now aggregators came into play, right? You got the internet service providers, right? You got AOLs and other internet aggregators. So essentially, over time, what happened is now, as the concept caught on and it became useful and became more productive, it's almost like this virtuous cycle of things, right? When that happens, people try to choose one over another, and eventually a lot of people land on one technology or a very few set of technologies. So I think that's how I see it, the state of internet today, right? So everything is consolidated. If you want productivity, maybe Microsoft. If you want social, it's Facebook. If you want Google for other things, and every one of them have their unique core thing where people gravitate towards, and they have a lot of money flowing in their way, right? So thereby, now what ended up happening is this kind of situation where the internet service providers started causing some trouble, and I think everybody's aware of the net neutrality issue, right? So the ISPs are starting to say, hey, well, maybe I can start discriminating certain traffic, right? Maybe you should not be downloading this much video, and I give you starting with that. I think everybody's trying to make profit margins higher and start discriminating. Then the privacy issue started up. Everybody's starting to steal your information for their own benefit, and mostly, I think we are now ended up in a situation where a lot of our stuff is with certain central authorities, and we are trying to take it back. And I think that's where the next revolution starts. How can we take it all back, and how can we get our privacy back? How can we get our dependency on these few big, I call it the proxy presidents of the world, right? You can say, hey, maybe Facebook head is one of the proxy presidents, right? So the internet president, if you will, right? So so there's these second tier people of power coming into play, right? When you say decentralization, you want that to be spread among a lot more people than just a very few. So I think that's the whole spirit. And with that, I think I start this slide. I think there are a few people who are trying to reimagine or rethink how the internet should be. And for this topic, I picked Syntropy, partly because it comes from the data center guys, William V. Norton from Equinix, which is one of the big data center provider, and I think they've done quite a bit of work in internet transit routing and segment optimizations, and so they have some deeper knowledge into how the inner working of internet is broken at the fundamental level. There are others. I listed a few: SmartMesh, Helium, Theta Networks, and Amber. They come from the other angle where, okay, so one way is to work with what we got, primarily because we all paid for it as taxpayers, right? I mean, all the infrastructure that went in is paid for by the taxpayer money. The new way is, okay, let's forget about that. Let's put a device in everybody's hands. Let's call it a wireless device, and you carry it along, and you are able to share your internet with others, right? So that's another angle. And how this wireless device hooks up to the main backbone is a different topic, right? They peer to some wholesale providers. You still have to get on the backbone somehow. But if you do, then you can share your internet. So the whole concept here is, okay, if you're able to share your internet, can you generate some revenue stream out of it? So that's essentially what he talks about in this opening code, right? So essentially, how can you, if you have excess bandwidth, if you have quality bandwidth in terms of low latency, it's pretty clean and no jitter, and it's consistent, we'll let you make money off it and participate in this new internet, right? Thereby creating a lot more people who can come into the play. Partly because I think even with the big companies now, what happened, right? Eventually, Google built their Google Fiber. There is no transit connectivity. People, they're all taken out of the equation. I think as solutions start to converge into a single place, those people will, economies of scale, right? They want to cut out all the middlemen. They want to do it themselves. And it's a natural thing to do. And eventually what ends up happening is everything now goes through pipes. You're onboarded into their network, you're onboarded into their cloud, and thereby they trap you in some way or shape or form. And you want to take it back, all of that back, say, hey, we have alternate ways to work around this type of so that's the whole idea. Any thoughts, Rajni?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very interesting, right? So I'm just drawing some parallels to the conversation that's happening right now, even in the Ethereum space, where we switched from a proof of work to proof of stake, and that was 300,000. There's just a lot of nodes working on that, but now two big places where people can do the proof of stake. So that once you move to proof of stake, if Ethereum feels a lot more centralized, that wasn't the intent of it. So I think it'll all play out. But it's a very interesting fact that how Web 2 was started was with these intents, but it started getting centralized with a few people owning a lot of power. So I'm glad we are. I think with the newer Web 3, we have the capability of realizing the vision of how even Web 2 was started. So that's exciting.
Right. So I think a couple of key things to notice here, right? So why would Web 3 succeed when Web 2 didn't? Because it's the same cycle, it's the same hype cycle. The more productive, the more useful something is, everybody gravitate towards it. And everybody gravitating towards it leads to a centralization of something, right? I think this is where I look at the blockchain, and I think one of the key things it brings is everything is encrypted in a way that no single person controls that encryption, right? So that's very key, right? What does it even mean, right? The blockchain itself is able to distribute the key pairs that are able to be shared without human intervention. So when that happens, now you guarantee that people other than the autonomous blockchain that's there, it cannot see what's happening, right? That means you cannot steal stuff without your knowledge. You cannot. So that's one key aspect of it, right? The second key aspect is the concept of community voting or DAOs or whatever you want to call it. How efficient that is going to be, we have to see over time. Because I have a lot of questions around that, right? Because communities, it's not the first time a big corporate walks into a small town and takes it over. It's the same concept. You could be a community. At the end of the day, somebody can walk in and buy you out. So there goes your decentralization, right? Your community, whatever. So this is where it gets really tricky. So how this community or the DAO concept evolves to keep or preserve the players and make the playground level for others. The second thing that has happened is, I think, probably the venture capitalists are tired of being kingmakers, right? So they want to be kings now. So essentially, that's what you see happening, right? Okay, now there's opportunity, so I can be king, and I don't have to put a person in there, right? So they participate in every one of these. So to see as an experiment, where can they become? So there's a lot of things under the hood, right? So we have to see how this all shapes up, but that's a separate topic. Now, getting back to how what is it that we're going to cover, right? So we'll see what are the drawbacks of the internet now at a high level, and what's Syntropy trying to solve, and what's this concept of distributed autonomous routing protocol, Syntropy stack, and open internet economy as a result of all of this. So as I mentioned before, right? So internet now is kind of become a provider-centric system. Data security itself is third-party dependent. There is no privacy at all at this point. I think your information is being taken from every source that's possible and collated. Cost-based and not performance. So even if you, so I think what ended up happening, even when you say internet is supposed to route traffic the best possible way or best effort or whatever be it, over time, these peering agreement or contracts between companies force traffic one way or the natural behavior of how they should go, because they funnel through certain directions. And so that's another angle to look at it, right? And if you see, even with Web3 or blockchain, right, a lot of this is still getting built on the existing internet. So I read somewhere, I mean, the entire blockchain-based economy is supported by 5 ISPs. 5 major ISPs. That's centralization, right? So, that's the problem, right? This is the problem that they are trying to solve. Again, one piece at a time. There's so many moving parts to this Web3 economy, and that last one is controlled by internet service providers solely, and that's the point. I think it has become very few people who control a lot of things. So this is the material from Syntropy. They're trying to make it from the provider-centric to user-centric. So they're trying to switch this behavior back to some extent. How efficient or how are they going to do this is yet to be seen. But I think it's a lot of these companies are trying to shift the focus back, inviting people to participate so they can get rewarded in this whole process. end-to-end data security, I think this is kind of the promise of the blockchain, and essentially how you're exchanging data, how your keys are exchanged, and how secure data is. It comes with the blockchain technology itself. Privacy by default, thereby if everything is encrypted and nobody can see what's going on, less chance of people trying to get that information from there. Best possible performance for every connection. That's the intellectual property that they are trying to build. I think these guys have patents related to this routing protocol. How can I guarantee the best routes, best performance for the price you pay, right? If you're paying for that kind of latency, you should be able to get that. And it's governed by users. Like I said, that's the big if, right? How these technologies will be governed by which users. What happens over time? Thoughts?
So, yeah, this is important, right? So, I had the same question you had, because the Web3 naysayers, the first thing they say is there's almost like a layer that's built on top of everything that was Web2 infrastructure, right? So at the end of the day, now I know the ISPs are, especially in Europe, I think, are asking some of these, because they need to keep it maintained, all of the connections, not just ISP, the people who own the infrastructure, and all these companies like Google and Facebook are making money of this. They're not paying for the upgrade. So there's a lot of conversations happening around the base layer of infrastructure and who needs to pay for it, who gets to keep the upgrades, and how should the money that everybody's building on top get split. So those are some outstanding questions that are kind of percolating in the background. So I'm very curious. Maybe you'll cover this later. I know, like, for example, I know Helium, right? If you have internet, you give it to, you can share it and make money, but still the underlying layer is still all the same that was here years ago. So I'm curious to see how you overcome that particular problem.
Right. So I think the underlying backbone, or the majority of so there's tiers here, right? So I think as time went by, you have these wholesale providers, and then you have the internet service providers, and over time the ISPs became service providers. Like at some point, they can't just give you the pipe, right? So this is what happened. This is what started happening. So first you got the bandwidth, and then they all started thinking about how can I supplement this bandwidth with some useful things. So maybe I give you email, maybe I give you Outlook account, so that's how they started producing value to you, keep retaining you in that particular space, right? But at the back of it all, there's the core, the fiber guys, or the people who transport things. They are tucked away in the back, and the service providers came to the front, right? And now, because they are closer to you, they are able to monitor your activity. So I think the effort is also trying to remove that layer and try to connect you directly back to the backbone, try to see whether, because now that you're encrypted, if you connect you directly to the backbone, what happens then, right? What happens when you get connected to these tiers? We'll see as we go through this topic. They are taking their own approach, because these guys come from the data center world. But this is a very initial use case, and I think they're going after the enterprise use case rather than the consumer. Even though it says user-centric, it's going to be time before it comes to the average user. It's now more towards the enterprise.
Companies.
Correct. Because if you are talking about big companies, they have multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, all kind of combinations. Now, the link between these clouds, or link between these places, or head offices, and all kind of stuff, right? So that's what they're going after, right? How can we? And there's always this excess bandwidth sitting with wholesale providers. Call it the dark fiber. They don't know how to monetize it. They don't want to share key information with others. So they want a foolproof way of interacting with other vendors in the space, so they can make money as well, right? That's what's the key thing with blockchain, right? Third party. What do they call it? The third-party liability gets reduced with the blockchain, right? Yes. So you can basically interact with a little bit of a more confidence than before, that they're not going to steal what you have and run away with it, type of thing. So that's the promise that's helping some of these thoughts come to act. So as I mentioned before, distributed and trustless data encryption. So there's no third-party involvement in either the cloud provider, certification authority, or content provider. These kind of middlemen are kind of taken out of the equation. And a global routing network, how does this happen, right? So this is where you're getting incentivized, whether you are a small player like with your bandwidth at home, or whether you are somebody else who wants to get into the marketplace with some excess bandwidth, either because you have maybe a license to a cell frequency and you want to monetize that, or there's this kind of bidding that goes on every now and then, right? Some people get into play and they have this wavelength and they want to get into business and they have some bandwidth. Or maybe somebody like Elon has a Starlink and they want to monetize Starlink. Again, there are different ways the bandwidth or the connectivity is getting established by independent people, and you want to promote those activity in a general sense, right? So you don't want them to have a very high cost of entering the market. So you get probably reap the rewards as you go and continue to grow.
Makes sense.
In general, I think the vision is a layer 0 protocol or layer 0 protocol for the internet for Web3. So it kind of gets everybody on the same page. This I took it from their website. I think just kind of summarizes the overall vision, right? All the stuff that happens in Web3 is going to still ride the internet, and whether that internet is the same as current internet or is it going to be a different form. Okay, this is a little bit more detail, but it gives you a little bit of idea as to how this all correlates with what's happening right now, right? So you can see in this block diagram the current internet economy piece, and then what does the open internet economy will offer? Where does Syntropy come into play, or players like Syntropy will come into play? So one of the key intellectual properties these guys have is kind of a distributed autonomous routing protocol. So it kind of is an intelligent layer. It's called it machine learning. As time goes by, or it learns the routes, it learns between the nodes. It tries to. It's pretty much, if you ask me, it's a similar thing what the big routers are supposed to do. It's the same thing. But
yeah.
now that it's coming to the consumer or the enterprises, you get to control, or you get to figure out which way you can shape your network, rather than letting somebody else control that. To an extent, I think programmable networking is in place, like SD-WAN is another technology, software-defined network. I think this is way more flexible than SD-WAN type of it. This is even giving more granularity with their stack, right? At a high level, you would install, let's call it a driver. They call it a Syntropy stack. You just put another network driver on your machine, or wherever data center machines, and it's going to take all the packets, encrypt it by default, which is one feature that's not there by any other stack, right? So they encrypt it by default and transport it through their DARP routing nodes. So essentially what happens is, now let's say you have your laptop, just simplified example, and you install the stack. It's going to take all your traffic, and regardless of where they come from, it's going to encrypt it and send it through the DARP nodes, and it'll figure out where the destination is, and it'll send it to that destination encrypted, and it'll get decrypted there and rendered. So that's the overall idea. And where is it useful, right? For people in data centers right now with big companies, right? And they can deploy the stack on every machine. Guarantee that if they want, they can program their network. Say, hey, between LA and Houston, I want this latency done. And what are all the DARP nodes available? I can choose, and they can let it adjust itself for a price. And what is that price, right? These guys have a token called NOIA token, and you get to pay that price in that token, and people who run these nodes get rewarded. Very simplified way of saying things, right? So people run nodes, they get rewarded to route traffic or share bandwidth, if you will, right? There's validators,
yeah,
and there is nominators. So they are after this Polkadot NPAS type of a nominator proof of stake type of algorithm that kind of gets the job done, if you will.
Makes sense. Yeah, I can see in the future, not too distant future, how this will go down to a consumer like me, right? because that's one of the biggest concerns still is privacy, whether you're using your phone or your laptop to even do transactions. There's so many scams and hacks you talk about. So I mean, I'm just kind of fast forwarding this, how useful it will be. But for big enterprise business, small businesses, I can see there's it's big business. There'll be big departments working on helping this. But if somebody can get this for a small, medium business, as online transactions, online communication, will be great opportunity there too.
Think about, the funny fact is, right, this all happened in one version or another before, right? We all went through the phase where, remember the BitTorrent days, and people used to participate, and they install something on your PC, and you don't know what it is. It's just running, and it's downloading and sharing with peers. It's doing all kind of stuff, and right,
you would have never done that, yeah.
And only now people are asking questions, but back in the day, people would do it because they're incentivized by, I get a copy of this movie, or I get a copy of this. So this is the danger with the average consumer, right? They can be lured into any of these schemes to run something on their PC, and I totally get it, right? But it's not the same with the. So I think that's why I look at some of these technologies who go to the bigger companies first and prove it out, and come to the smaller guys, so they come with a reputation, right? Other than that, if you just say some project started and they say, run this on your PC and share your bandwidth, it's like, no, I'm not doing that. Exactly. So it's a tricky situation. It's the same thing, right? This morning I thought about this. There used to be a time antivirus thing is crazy, right? It used to be, now where is it? Where is the antivirus? Nobody hears about it. Where is the virus? See, the problem is they have emptied your pockets with this virus. Now they've gone somewhere else. So eventually, I think all these hackers and they move, right? It's kind of economy by itself. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly what I was thinking. Is I used to pay for Norton, McAfee, and it was not cheap, especially when you have 4 or 5 devices. Now Windows offers their own version. Free, that's all I'm saying. I'm like, okay, if it really happens to it, I mean, there has to be some rules. You don't go to like shady website. I tell my kids they don't go there, but I don't see that much activity in that space to warrant the money that we used to spend for that.
Right. I think as over time, like everything else, when things converge, the value converges there. So you don't need to go after 100,000 people to get $5, right? You can go to the big bank and steal it. that's what happened, right? They go to the Equifax of the world to go steal information. They don't need to steal it from you. That was the early days of internet when it was decentralized. So they have to go get it from you. Now it's all centralized, so they can get it from the centralized place. That's what I mean.
Right. Same amount of time and resources, might as well hit the big jackpot. Yeah, makes sense.
Exactly. So the economic value slide, I mean, pretty obvious here. You got a bunch of validators. You have nominators who take money and deposit onto the validators. Validators get chosen at random using the NPAS whatever algorithm, and you get to build the blocks. Relay nodes are the ones that people run to make money, right? So they are the ones that kind of control that latency and other things, and they have the intelligence to route your traffic. And users pay the tokens to carry the traffic, and that's essentially the model that's proposed by this particular project.
That's cool.
And I have a bunch of references out there from Syntropy. Whatever I presented here was taken from their material. So yeah, I think a lot of these are exciting developments, right? I think the 2 key things I watch for is this built-in secure encryption, which is not controlled by anybody, right? The certificate authority or the keys are not deposited with somebody. So as long as that stays autonomous and independent of tampering, I think there's a little bit of hope. And then the next one is this community. That's because at the end of the day, everybody wants to make money. They sell out at some point. So that's why I'm a little skeptical. Over time, maybe it'll all centralize again when everything becomes more productive. But we don't know that yet.
Makes sense. Yeah, that was definitely a very interesting topic, right? Like it's a foundational topic that is near and dear to all of us who are in this space, like where we goes. But also, I see so much opportunities, whether it's in the education space or here, because I know nobody can tell the future. None of what we say is financial advice too. But if from a builder and an investor perspective, and I'm looking at these opportunities, either you jump in and you start building on things that are on the slope of enlightenment, or you are looking at companies that are already doing that, and you support them whichever way you decide to do. So I feel like there's more. We can talk about each one of these topics for weeks. Just to want to leave the audience with this, these topics are we talking through this for our own learning, which is what we started the whole process for, but also just get our gears turning on, okay, now that we learn about education, what are some of the opportunities that can get involved in. And we will continue to bring you topics like this every 2 weeks, and looking forward to talking with all of you in a couple of weeks with a couple of exciting topics. So Balaji, thank you for your time. This was fun.
Thanks, Rajni. Yeah, fun as always. Thank you.